In this video, we'll create a viral 3D Instagram reel like this one, and it's actually part 2 of the Houston Kold video. The response was amazing, everyone was asking about part 2, so here it is. But something really important before we begin, I'm busy creating my own masterclass. And before you skip, I'm not trying to sell you anything here. I've decided to create a waitlist where you get free extended content and the first 100 people that join will get a discount. Click on the link in the description to join the waitlist. Now let's jump into it. So let's break down the video first that we're gonna recreate today. Basically, this is Houston Kold. If you don't know him, shout out to him. Link in the description. He has these crazy reels with this really cool effect. And we already created this part in the previous video. Now we're gonna focus on the second part where basically it goes into this cartoon. Then it zooms into this cool text. It will show a brain, zooms out, and you see this ink splatter fill up. You'll see a grid and you'll see this grid with this text. Now this is already plenty for this tutorial. There's a lot much more to cover. So let's get a illustration first. Now there's a couple ways to get this illustration. We can use a free pick or we can also use a AI tool to generate it. I'm now gonna just check if there's something like this. Actually really like this. I'm just gonna edit it so it's black and white. So let's import the AI file. You can just choose composition or a layer size. And if you don't, or if you can't do this, you can always edit something in Photoshop, but I'm gonna try it in After Effects. So let's just keep it a layer size and just open the composition and let's see if we can dismantle this. It's actually quite cool because we can customize it by basically keeping elements that you might like. In this case, I'm just gonna delete everything. And then we have the guy and we even have the paper separately. I'm just gonna delete it by pressing backspace. We have the character and I'm just gonna go to tint and I'm gonna drop that on the layer by double clicking. And I think this will do. Just copy it over and we're just gonna paste it in here in our main composition. And of course press S for scale and I'm just gonna move this over and I'm gonna scale it up. Now what we can even do, because this is an Illustrator layer, we can right click on the layer and we can go to create shapes from vector layer. And what this does is it basically converts it to a shape. So we can delete the bottom layer and go into the top layer and remove the tint because we're not going to need that anymore. Because the thing is, we can literally customize it even further. Basically double click on this layer and let's double click again. Let's just open the contents. You'll see a lot of groups and we just have to search which one is the t-shirt. And I think this is the t-shirt. Let's see what that does. Yeah, this is perfect. We can even turn it off and have a white layer like this. Now, this looks cool. I'm quite happy with this, but I would extend the image a bit. And I also think it needs like a dark overlay. And the dark overlay, I think the best thing to do is just add a solid and make it black or a dark color and just press OK. And then get the pen tool, then turn it off and then just draw a rough shape around him. And this doesn't have to be perfect, just basically, like I said, a rough outline. Then go to F for feather and put this really high, something like 50 or maybe even 100. Let's see what that looks like. Something like this. I'm gonna even increase the feather. And then of course press T for transparency and just lower the transparency a bit, just so it stands out less. And also because he's in the dark and also a bit emotional, we also want to convey that using this. Now one thing that's important is always to link this to the character. And of course we're also going to make them 3D because later on we're going to move this. Now let's first make sure that it's scaled up so it fills the whole frame, something like this. And I'm just going to move it over a bit. I'm happy with this composition and I'm just going to add a new camera to this. Now you can choose 1-node or 2-node camera. To keep it simple, I'm just going to use the 1-node camera. To quickly explain it, a 2-node camera is where you can also control where the camera is looking at, so to a specific point. Now in some situations that can be really cool, but it does complicate things because if you just want to move the camera, you don't want to also move the point of interest all the time. So I like 1-node cameras. And there are also plugins to use, which makes things even easier. But maybe you know that I also really enjoy using After Effects without plugins because I want to make it as accessible to everyone. So I don't want to use plugins that nobody can afford. So let's first set a keyframe here. And then at the beginning, of course, we have the previous animation of the other tutorial, which we could import. I am gonna do that later on. I'm just moving the camera a bit, and then I'm just gonna keyframe it and ease it. And of course, turn on the motion blur. And there's another trick that I want to teach you guys. If you don't like your motion blur enough, basically if the motion blur is not noticeable enough, you can, or of course, move the camera way more quick. Like for example, if I move it from, let's say, this point and to the next point, there will be more motion blur. But there is a trick to change the motion blur, and it's going to composition settings, going to advanced, and here you see the shutter angle, and basically increasing the shutter angle increases the motion blur. Now, don't go overboard with this. If you go really high, for example, you go to 500, it can become unrealistic. But this is a great way to add motion blur if you don't have too much motion happening. So let's say we keep it around 500, and I'm just gonna play this back. And as you can see, there's just way more motion blur anyway. Again, it won't solve a movement. For example, this movement is still too slow in my opinion. So I would still add more of a movement, maybe move it up, move it like this, and then just play it back. Let's see what happens. And then of course, open the graph editor and basically make sure that it slows down a bit more. And as you can see, there's a lot of motion and there's a lot of motion blur, and this looks really cool. I'm just gonna turn off the transparency for now, and I'm gonna add a new white solid, and I'm just gonna make sure that there's a background transition. So let's just move this down. You don't have to make this 3D, that doesn't really matter. We're just gonna keyframe this to when the guy is showing up, and I'm just gonna keep it at 3% or maybe a bit higher, maybe I would say 10 or 7. So there's just a bit more movement. Now I really like this. Now let's add our text. I'm just gonna type here, aimed directly, select the text, make sure that you have a font that's really cool. I like this, let's put it here. Of course, make it 3D, let's move it over. Then this is another trick, hold Command or Control on Windows Shift D to split your layer, and you can then change the text by double clicking, changing this to add the, and I'm gonna make it a bit bigger maybe. Also, I can add a glow to this to really sell the effect. And actually Deep Glow is a great plugin to use for this, but the normal glow with After Effects also works great. Just copy over these settings and this will do. Maybe I even increase it a bit more by increasing the radius and then decreasing the intensity. Then let's just copy that over and paste it on the first text too. And the first text I'm also gonna change a bit by adding a enter in the middle, and I'm also just gonna make it bigger, decreasing the line height to make it more close to each other. And then let's move it a bit. There we go, looks cool. Now, when we look back at uSense Reel, you can see that there's also a rotation in the camera. Not only that, there's also a bit of distortion in the edges. We're gonna create that later on, but for now, just looking at the text, you also see that here is a really cool glitch effect, and you can see the brain added to this layer. Now let's do the text glitch effect first. Again, just press on the text, Command-Shift-D to separate it. And I've already imported a screen glitch footage. Now, again, you can download these assets in the description down below by joining our Discord. Just import this and make sure that it covers the text. Then I'm just gonna turn off the glitch first, and I'm gonna type here destruction. That's cool. And then I'm gonna go to effects and preset, and I'll go and add the displacement map effect to the layer by double clicking. Now make sure that the displacement map layer is the screen glitch. Let's turn off the glow for now and let's see what happens. I'm just experimenting with these parameters, and basically just put the glow at the bottom, and then the displacement map I'll put on 5, and then tile map, and then expand output. And what this does is basically make sure that it covers the whole text. Not only that, it also creates this really cool effect, as you can see. Now, if you want the glitch to stop, you can just set a keyframe. Basically now it says 5, so just keyframe the displacement, go a bit further, and then turn it to 0. And that will make sure it won't displace anymore. So it will give a cool quick glitch, and that's exactly what we want. And if you want to add the colors, we can even do that by duplicating it, and for example making it first red or first blue, or in this case maybe a bit of light blue like this. I'm just gonna add a Gaussian blur to this, increase it really high, and make sure that it's only one frame by holding Alt bracket I'm gonna make the next one blue, and then next frame, duplicate, move it over, and let's just make it the red this time, and let's see what this looks like. This is really cool. Now, of course, we can add some camera motion to this, or by wiggling the camera, or just going into the position and making sure that there's constant movement. And that's really the trick with a lot of these 3D reels, is that there's constant movement. So the camera is not really standing still at a certain moment. And again, you can be creative with this by just moving it over sometimes and just like, again, making sure that there's always movement in it. You can even press R for rotation, and then we can slowly pivot the camera, maybe even pivot the camera like down, which I'm also just gonna keyframe. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's a nice thing about this style, is that you can just like go around, move the camera all over the place, add some layers, and don't be scared to experiment with this. Especially because everything goes so quick anyway. Just make sure that the text is readable and that there's constant motion. Now let's distort the text a bit by going into layer, new, adjustment layer. Then we'll go into immersive video, and then a VR chromatic aberration. And this is a really cool effect that you see in a lot of these videos, basically adding a bit of spice. Now don't go overboard with this. I would keep it at a minimum. You can even turn the aberration to 0, then increase the fall of distance. And this really sells the effect. Now, of course, you can add a background layer to this too, but let's now add the brains to this. I quite like this one, but I'm just checking on FreePic. There's of course a lot of options, but I do like this one. Now let's just import this, make sure of course that it's 3D, and then right click and create shapes from vector layer. Now I'm just gonna scale it down a bit so we can see what's happening here. And I'm just gonna double click on the layer, and I'm gonna remove the white background first. And then I also don't like these stars. I'm also gonna remove those by just double clicking on them and then deleting it. Now, of course, basically the background gets darker, and this is not that special. We can just press T for transparency and then keyframe the shadow. But what is really cool is the transition of this brain. You see, when we look at the original, you can see that it gets darker. Then here's the brain, and there's a lot of motion blur in this. There's some chromatic aberration on this, which is the same effect that we used before. There's a grid on this, which is a basic image overlay. But what I want to focus on is two things: is one, this animation, and two is how it glitches. Is one, this cool twirl animation. One, this animation where it comes in. And then of course how it moves around. First, let's just copy over the VR chromatic aberration that we used before. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add that. And what I'm gonna do is increase the aberration on red. Then we can even, to use the same glitch effect on the text, we can even copy that over by using the displacement map and adding that to our brain. This will make it glitch. Then of course add a turbulent displace, decrease the amount and decrease the size to something like 20 and 20. And then the evolution, we can just keyframe this. Of course, you can also put an expression here, but this is not that hard, guys. You just press the keyframe button and then just move it over. And there's some cool movement in it. I think the glitch is a bit too harsh. So I'm just gonna press U to see my keyframes. And here I can see my glitch. I'm not gonna add an end to it, and I'm just gonna remove these keyframes. I'm just gonna make sure that this is way lower, something like 2 by 2. And this is really cool. I'm just gonna drag the turbulent displacement out a bit. And I really like this effect already. I just need to make sure that it comes in a cool way. So we're gonna add the effect twirl. First we have to set the twirl center. So just press the position button. Basically it's like a button next to it. And then we can just select the center. And then you can already change the angle, see what it does. If it's not the effect that you want, you can decrease the radius. And I'll show you in a bit what this does. Let's say we lower this. Basically the radius of the twirl will be lower. And the cool thing is of course we can then keyframe the angle, set it in point, and then set it to 0. Then press U, then of course select all our layers, then easy ease. And I'm also gonna make sure that there's a lot of ease in this, so basically that only the last part is gonna slow down. And then there's this really cool animation. I think the glitch is a bit too harsh, and we can change that by using different glitch footage. Now again, this is just a grid overlay, and also the brains that they're using is a bit different. I'm just trying to explain the effects behind it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now we see the standard shatter effect on the text, which is literally just a shatter. We can just drag that on the destruction text. Then later on, we'll see this really cool ink pattern. Now there's multiple ways to do this. This can be using a plugin, of course, but it can also be with a shape or maybe with a vector layer. I'm just going to show you an easy way to make this cool effect. Basically, just make sure that the pen tool is selected. Then I'm just gonna draw a random shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, and I'll show you why in a moment. Close it up, then open this shape, go into contents and add a wiggle paths. Open the wiggle paths and increase the size. Now this won't do much. You'll think like, okay, this is not the effect that I want. That's true, because we're gonna add a turbulent displace. Now we can increase and decrease the size, but we can also decrease the complexity or increase the complexity. And if we increase the complexity, as you can see, we create this really cool effect that looks like ink. Now to really make this perfect, we're just gonna double click on our shape. We're gonna adjust our shape a bit, making sure that it's out of the border. We can even make it 3D, of course, and we can even press S to scale it up. Now the cool thing about it is when this is more to the front, and of course when we change the color of this layer to black by going into our fill and turning it into black, you can see this really cool effect. The thing is, we can animate this, so we can even just press P for position, or you can change the shape if you want to. And then, for example, move it down, and you'll have this really cool effect like you can see. The only thing like you can see is that there is a edge on the bottom or at the top, and there's a way to get around that. Just cut the effect by pressing Command X or Control X, then press Command Shift C to pre-compose this, then scale it down a bit, something like this, then Command Shift C to pre-compose it, move it in, then paste the effect again, and then we can scale the composition to make sure that it covers our full layer. This also enables us to go into this layer, turn on the transparency, and making sure that you have a really cool animation in here. Because what we can do is just duplicate this and then of course make sure that it's at the other side. And I'm just going to animate this a bit better by selecting the first layer, for example, moving it in like this, something like this, and then doing the same with the other one. So just making sure that the first keyframe is at the bottom right and that the second keyframe is a bit closer. Now, of course, we need to adjust these shapes by double clicking, making sure the whole layer is covered. Just move them out like this. And let's just go to our layer quickly to see what happens. And as you can see, we have this really cool effect that looks really similar. And the thing is, you can use this for any project. Now there's a basic camera zoom out where some text is added. And if you'll add that, you get something like this. And I try to fit as much as possible in this tutorial, but as you probably can see, we haven't even finished this reel yet. This is why I'm also really looking forward to launching my masterclass where I can really dive deep and create videos that are a bit more raw, but do really go in depth. So if you want the masterclass with a discount, do click the link in the description to join the waitlist. Then again, I thank you for all the amazing support that you guys give to me. I love creating these videos and I will keep them coming. Don't forget to subscribe, and then I'll see you next time.